It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood, a neighborly day for a beauty. Would you be mine? Could you be mine?
It is 50 years ago today since Fred Rogers strolled through that front door, marking his PBS debut. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood would in time become the longest-running series in public television history. Rogers went on to be a steadfast campaigner for government funding for children's television. His talent and his advocacy would later lead to a Presidential Medal of Freedom. Beyond the limelight, what about the man himself? Filmmaker and journalist Benjamin Wagner knows firsthand thanks to a chance encounter on Nantucket. And after Rogers' death in 2003, Wagner would embark on a journey to meet those who knew him best. And it's all part of his documentary called Mr. Rogers and Me. Let's take a quick look.
Later, Mr. Rogers and I stood on the back porch of the Crooked House staring out to sea. He asked me about my job, and frankly, I was a little embarrassed. I mean, here he was, America's most beloved neighbor, creator and steward of one of television's most substantive, long-running shows. Me? As one-time editor of the high school newspaper and sometime singer-songwriter, my day job made a lot of sense. But I had my moments of ambivalence, too. A PBS mind in a jump-cut, sound-bit MTV world, trying to figure out just what I could do to make it a better place. Mr. Rogers didn't render any judgment, but said simply, "I feel so strongly that deep and simple is far more essential than shallow and complex. Deep and simple is far more essential than shallow and complex."
And I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Rogers' neighbor, Benjamin Wagner, to the program. Benjamin, nice to have you here with us. You and I were talking beforehand. My children, now 35 and 31, they both grew up to Mr. Rogers. That being said, let me ask you to elaborate a little bit on what we just saw. How was it that you came then to meet Fred Rogers?
Mr. Rogers summered in a tiny cottage on the edge of Nantucket, away from the resorty sort of upscale, I think, place that people think of, which has never been my experience there. And my mother rented a tiny cottage next door, has for years. And she called me one day and said, "You'll never believe who I just met on the beach." And she was studying for theology, and as you know, he was an ordained minister. They struck up a conversation, which was not at all unusual for him. And she, as parents will do, talked about my brother and I. My brother also works in broadcast. And she said, you should come meet him. And the truth is, I don't know if I ran right out there or if it was later, but I went out to Nantucket to meet him. And as I stood on that back porch, he said, "Spread the message." And so here I am, fast forwarding, 10 plus, 15, 16 years, multiple years of making the film, still playing just a teeny role in trying to remind people what a remarkably special human being he was.
Tell me a little bit about the deep and simple.
Sure.
As he said, is far more effective than shallow and complex. What did that mean to you when he first said it to you? And then did it come to mean anything different to you?
To me, it came to mean three things. One, the idea that our dominant culture is really moving towards shallow and complex, and that humanity and the core essence of who we are is really quite profound and deep and simple. And that there are three core tenets to that. One, being a part of a greater community, being cognizant that we are all connected and a part of something greater than ourselves. Two, pausing periodically to reflect on that.
And boy, we don't pause much in our lives, do we?
Silence, right? This is what made that place so special and what made him so special. And the third is just being wary of material and being cognizant that it probably isn't what defines us, but that this is what defines us, that interaction and engagement and relationship.
What did you find that would make him become such an important part of people's lives? I talk about myself and my wife and our two children for so many years.
I don't think, and my understanding is there is just not 1 inch of that show that's a mistake. Every word was reasoned and considered and discussed with professional collaborators, right? So I think it was intentional and thoughtful and honed. But ultimately, I think it gets right back to the thesis, which is deep and simple. I could sit and talk with you about these things for as long as you want, because they're ultimately, I think we all recognize in some place that isn't in a text message or in the buzz of traffic or the speed of contemporary culture, that these are the important things. At least that's what he provided for me, a grounding in some very core values that are, timeless.
Well, again, it's called Mr. Rogers and Me. It's a wonderful look at a wonderful man. Benjamin Wagner did a great job with it, and I know it was an interesting journey for you.
Absolutely. Still is.
It is indeed. I appreciate you spending some time with us. You be well.
Thank you so much.
Take care.